My name is Claire Monroe. I'm 33, and for as long as I can remember, my family treated me like background staff in my own home. While my sister Sophie sparkled under the chandelier, I was the one sweating in the kitchen, setting tables and carrying trays. I told myself it was temporary, but the years kept slipping by. Then, just 2 days before New Year's, my mother's voice cut sharp through the phone, telling me to cancel my plans and cook for 30 of Sophie's elite friends. That moment, I realized something inside me had shifted. What happens when the daughter they thought was invisible decides she won't play that role anymore? Stay with me, because this story will take you from silence to the kind of truth no one in my family was prepared to face. Let me take you back to where it began. I was 33 years old and still being treated like the unpaid maid of the Monroe family. That is how it always felt to me. Growing up in Westport, Connecticut, in a house with marble floors and chandeliers, you would think I was one of the lucky ones. But every holiday and every family event was the same picture. My mother, Elaine, would smile as she ushered guests into the living room. My father, Richard, would pour drinks. My younger sister, Sophie, would sparkle in a designer dress, and I would be hidden in the kitchen sleeves, rolled up sweating over the stove. It had been that way since I was 17. At Thanksgiving, while my classmates went home to sit at beautifully decorated tables, I was basting turkeys and making side dishes for 30 people. At Christmas, I scrubbed silver trays until my fingers hurt while Sophie entertained her friends by the fireplace. Even at birthdays or summer garden parties, I was the one who ran errands, set the table, and cleared the plates. I was the invisible daughter, the one who made things run smoothly while my sister shined in the spotlight. The words my mother used still echo in my ears. Claire is so helpful. She is always ready to pitch in. She never said I was talented or accomplished, just helpful, as if my only value was doing chores. And every time she said it in front of others, I swallowed the sting, because correcting her would only make me look bitter. One memory cut sharper than the rest. Sophie's engagement celebration at the Westport Country Club 3 years ago. Nearly 200 guests, crystal glasses, string quartet. I spent 12 hours in the back preparing hors d'oeuvres. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun, my shirt stained with olive oil. When one of the club members asked my mother what I did for a living, she laughed and waved her hand. Claire helps out. She is good in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Sophie floated across the dance floor in a gown my parents had bought her for $4,000, introduced as our star in public relations. That night, while applause surrounded her, I drove home alone in my second-hand Honda, exhausted and invisible. It did not matter that I had been building something of my own, quietly, brick by brick. To them, I was still the girl in the kitchen. They never asked about my work, never cared where I lived or how I afforded my life. It was easier for them to assume I had nothing going on, that I was a dependent they could summon whenever they needed a caterer for free. As I think back, I realize how deeply those years carved me. Every Thanksgiving, when Sophie got to sit at the head table and lead a toast, I was refilling wine glasses. Every New Year's Eve, when the fireworks glowed over Long Island Sound, I was scraping pans in the sink. Even small things reminded me of my place. My childhood bedroom with my high school trophies and books had been turned into Sophie's overflow closet. My belongings shoved into cardboard boxes in the basement, while Sophie got the entire third floor renovated with a walk-in closet. My father never stopped any of it. He simply stayed quiet, sipping his drink, watching my mother and sister praise each other. Richard Monroe was a retired attorney, respected at the country club, but at home he chose silence. His silence hurt more than any sharp word from my mother. There was one Thanksgiving when I remember breaking down after everyone left. I was 24, living in New York City by then, but I had come home to help. I cooked from morning until evening for 35 relatives. My mother barely thanked me. Sophie got a round of applause for giving a 5-minute speech about gratitude. When I walked into the empty kitchen after midnight, staring at the piles of dirty dishes, I whispered to myself, "Why am I still doing this?" But the next year I came back again because guilt and duty always pulled me. 15 years of that cycle does something to a person. It makes you question your worth. It makes you believe maybe you are only valuable when you are serving. For a long time, I thought perhaps that was my role, the quiet daughter who kept the machine running. But something inside me had been growing slowly, steadily, like a flame waiting for oxygen. That flame turned into resolve as I packed my suitcase in my Manhattan apartment, thinking about the call I knew was coming. My mother's voice would carry that commanding edge, telling me to cancel my plans and come home to cook. Sophie's friends, 30 of them elite and glamorous, were expecting a lavish year-end dinner. And once again, I was supposed to be the invisible one, making it all happen. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, at the woman I had become. I was no longer 17. I was not a timid girl desperate for approval. I was 33, independent, and tired of being treated like help in a house that should have been home. This time, things would not go their way. I would not be standing in the kitchen while Sophie held court. I would not let my mother parade me as a servant. I felt it in my bones. Something was about to shift, and once it did, nothing in our family would ever be the same again. I zipped my suitcase shut, the sound echoing in my quiet apartment, a sound that felt like a promise. My phone buzzed on the counter just as I pushed the suitcase aside. The screen lit up with my mother's name. My chest tightened. I knew the script before I even answered, but something in me wanted to hear it straight from her. I slid my finger across and held the phone to my ear. Her voice cut through without a hello. "Claire, you need to cancel whatever silly plans you think you have. Sophie is hosting an important year-end dinner, and 30 of her friends are coming. They are the right people, the kind of people this family needs to impress. You will be here by noon tomorrow to start cooking." Her tone was sharp, the kind that brooked no argument. I walked over to the window, looking down at the lights of Manhattan. My voice was steady. "What is happening tomorrow?" "Sophie's friends are gathering at the house. Executives, clients, people who matter," she said with a smirk I could practically hear. "This is not negotiable. You will prepare a full dinner, 7 courses, sides, wine pairings. Use the silver and the Waterford crystal. Do not embarrass us." I clenched my jaw, remembering how many times she had said the same words. "Do not embarrass us." As if my very existence was a liability. I pressed my lips together, listening to the silence between her words. "Mom, I have plans." "What plans could possibly be more important than your sister's career?" "Sophie is building relationships that benefit this entire family. You should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute." My eyes shifted to the envelope on the table. Inside were contracts waiting for signatures, contracts worth millions. To her, I was still the girl between jobs living in a tiny apartment. She had no idea what I had built. I said nothing, and she filled the gap quickly. "We will expect you home in the morning. Be sensible, Claire. Do not make me regret trusting you with this." The line went dead before I could respond. I let out a slow breath, my hand trembling just enough to betray the storm inside. Seconds later, another buzz shook the phone. A text from Sophie. "Mom says you are cooking tomorrow. Do not screw it up. These people are important." I laughed out loud, a bitter laugh that startled me with its edge. She still thought she could command me with the same condescension she had used since we were children. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. My calendar blinked with tomorrow's reminder. Flight to Miami departure. 8 p.m. Dinner with Victoria Liang, CEO of Summit Hospitality at 7 p.m. on the 31st of December. The meeting that could change everything. I traced my finger across the printed ticket. My company's future depended on this. 60 employees counted on me. Maria had just placed a down payment on her first home. Marcus was planning to move his kids to better schools. This was not just about me anymore. The phone rang again. My mother's voice came sharp, almost frantic. "Finally, I was starting to worry you were not taking this seriously." "Mom, I cannot do it." Silence crackled through the line. Then her voice rose sharper. "What do you mean you cannot? I have a business trip. I am flying to Miami tonight." She laughed, the cruel kind of laugh I knew too well. "Business trip. Claire, stop this nonsense. You have no business. Your sister needs this. Family comes first. Family comes first when you need me to scrub pots and roast turkeys. When has family ever come first for me? How dare you? She was nearly shouting now. What could you possibly have in Miami? An important meeting. With who? A smirk laced her tone. The manager of a diner. I closed my eyes and steadied myself. I am a CEO, Mom. Another laugh, dismissive and cutting. A CEO of what? Your imaginary company. Enough with the fantasies. It is not imaginary. I have 60 employees. You are being dramatic. Sophie has real clients to impress. You owe us. I do not owe you anything. Her gasp was sharp. If you leave, do not bother coming back. I let the words sink in, familiar and worn. Threats I had heard 100 times before. My voice was quiet when I answered. Then I guess this is goodbye. You cannot be serious. I am serious. I am done being the family servant. Her voice cracked with fury. You ungrateful girl. I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the dark window. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. They trembled with release. Another buzz lit the phone. Sophie's message popped up. What did you just do? Mom is having a meltdown. Stop being dramatic and get over here. I typed back quickly. I am not coming. Seconds later, the phone rang again. Sophie's voice screeched through. Are you insane? Mom is telling everyone you lost your mind. You cannot abandon us like this. I have a meeting, Sophie. Stop lying. This is about that fight when Mom gave me your old room, isn't it? My room became your closet years ago. And no, this is about my career. Career. You cook sometimes. That is not a career. I smiled to myself. I own a company, Sophie. Sure you do. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Look, I will pay you to cook. $200. That is more than fair. My laugh came low and sharp. My personal chef rate is $6,000 a day. Keep your money, she hissed into the phone. You are going to ruin everything. Mom will disown you. That is her choice. You are really going to let us down like this. 30 guests. Victoria Liang will be there. Do you understand Hushi Island? My pulse quickened, but I forced my tone to stay calm. Then hire a caterer. No one is available on December 30th. Are you out of your mind? I looked at the slip of paper on my counter where I had written down 3 emergency catering hotlines, a professional courtesy I had left just in case. I kept that to myself. I am not coming, Sophie. Her voice turned into a shriek. If you do this, you are dead to us. I whispered into the quiet of my apartment. I already am. I hung up and placed the phone face down. The room fell silent, only the hum of the refrigerator filling the air. I leaned against the counter, heart pounding, but my spine straight. For the first time in years, I had chosen myself. I picked up the plane ticket again, running my thumb across the print. Tomorrow night, I would be in Miami, sitting across from Victoria Liang, the woman my family wanted so badly to impress. And for once, I would not be invisible. When I closed my eyes that night, old memories rushed in uninvited stacking one over another until I could almost hear the clinking of glasses and the low hum of polite laughter from years ago. I was 17 the first time my mother trusted me with the entire Thanksgiving dinner. Trust was the word she used, but it never felt like trust. It felt like an order. Sophie had been given the job of welcoming guests and leading the grace before the meal. I had been told to keep my hair pulled back, stay in the kitchen, and make sure nothing burned. I can still remember the sting of dish soap on my hands that year. My cousins crowded around Sophie, giggling about her college plans and complimenting her new boots while I scrubbed pans in the sink. Not one person asked me about my plans. Not one. The pattern repeated itself so many times it etched into me like stone. Easter brunch, summer garden parties, Christmas dinners, all of them played out with the same roles. Sophie, the golden child in silk dresses, and me, the one who could always be counted on to handle the mess. When I left for college in New York, I thought distance would change things. It did not. I came home for winter break and walked into my childhood bedroom only to find it filled with boxes of Sophie's clothes. My trophies, my books, my posters, all shoved into the basement. Sophie needed the space, Mom explained with that casual shrug of hers. Image matters in PR. I remember standing in that doorway numb while Sophie twirled in front of her new mirror. She flashed me a smile that was not really a smile, more of a declaration. This is mine now. I swallowed my anger because what else could I do? Year after year, the story kept repeating. At the country club Christmas gala, Dad proudly introduced Sophie to his golf buddies. This is our success story, he said, resting a hand on her shoulder. When someone asked about me, his answer was always the same. Claire is between opportunities. I wanted to scream that very morning I had signed a $500,000 catering contract, but I stayed quiet. It was easier for them to keep me in a box labeled disappointment. There was a summer barbecue when the humiliation cut sharper than usual. I had driven home in my used Honda Civic, proud of myself for managing the payments on my own. Sophie pulled up minutes later in a brand new BMW, a graduation gift from my parents. As everyone admired the car, I stood there holding a tray of lemonade, pretending not to notice. Dad laughed, saying how she deserved it for all her hard work. I wanted to ask what hard work he meant, but the words stuck in my throat. The memories bled into one another, endless nights of chopping vegetables while Sophie clinked glasses, my mother's hand on my shoulder, telling me I was useful, not brilliant, not ambitious, just useful. Over time, I began to believe them. Maybe I was only good for peeling potatoes and arranging flowers. Maybe I was never meant for anything else. But deep inside, another voice whispered. The voice that pushed me to work double shifts at a catering company in New York while studying at night. The voice that urged me to save every tip until I had $6,000 to my name, the seed money I used to start Monroe Luxe events. That voice never belonged to my mother or my father or Sophie. It belonged to me. Still, even as I built something real, even as my client list grew, and my employees looked to me as their leader, my family's dismissals haunted me. When I bought a new car in 2020, a modest Lexus mom rolled her eyes and told her friends it must be leased. When I moved into my apartment overlooking Central Park, Sophie whispered loudly enough for me to hear that a boyfriend must be paying for it. No one believed I had earned any of it. They never asked. They never wanted to know. The silence from my father was the hardest to bear. Richard Monroe, the man who had spent decades in court, arguing cases with precision, could not muster the courage to speak one word of defense for me. He sat back at dinner parties sipping scotch, while Mom belittled me and Sophie basked in the glow. His silence said everything. Sometimes I wonder if I would have given up, if not for the people outside my family who saw me clearly. My first client, a hotel manager who told me I had a rare eye for detail. Maria, my head chef, who said she had never felt so respected in a kitchen. Marcus, who left a stable job at Hilton because he believed in my vision. They were the mirrors I never had at home. As I stood by my window that night, phone still buzzing with unanswered calls, I thought of every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every summer barbecue where I had been invisible. The pain was real, but so was the resolve it had created. Without those years of being dismissed, maybe I would not have pushed so hard to build something that could not be ignored. The thought settled over me like a blanket. I was not the girl they had shoved into the kitchen anymore. I was not the daughter who could be dismissed with a wave of the hand. For the first time in my life, I let the memories run their course without shrinking under them. I watched them rise and fall like waves, and then I let them go. My eyes moved back to the packed suitcase by the door. Tomorrow I would walk through an airport, board a plane to Miami, and step into a room where I was not the family's servant but the CEO of a company people respected. And this time, when my mother and sister tried to paint me as nothing more than help the truth, would be too loud to ignore. I sat down at my desk and opened the leather folder that never left my side. Inside were the documents that proved who I really was, not the version my family insisted on presenting. The gold lettering across the top read Monroe Luxe Events, and every time I traced my fingers over it, I felt a sense of pride that my mother's dismissive words could never erase. 10 years earlier, I had started with $6,000 saved from long nights working in other people's kitchens. Now I was looking at contracts worth millions. The company had grown into 4 branches, each one buzzing with 60 employees who trusted me to make the right decisions. I was not a helper, I was the one steering the ship. My laptop chimed with an incoming call. Marcus Hill, my COO, appeared on the screen, his tie already loosened from a long day. "Claire, I just wanted to confirm tomorrow's schedule. Victoria Liang is expecting us at 7 for dinner at the Summit Hotel in Miami. She specifically said she wants to meet you in person before finalizing." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I will be there." "Good." He gave me a tired smile. "This is the one, Claire. This contract will put us on the national map." After the call ended, I clicked through the files on my screen. The numbers glowed back at me. $2.5 million in exclusive catering rights for Summits, Florida, resorts, a 6-month waiting list for high-end clients, and expansion plans that would double our staff by the end of next year. It was not just growth, it was survival. Maria had been saving for a house, Marcus had promised better schools for his kids, and dozens of families relied on paychecks with my company's name at the top. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about how different that reality was from what my mother told people. To her, I was drifting between jobs, living in some cramped apartment, barely hanging on. The lie had been told so many times that even my father parroted it. He had once said to a golf buddy at the country club, "Claire is figuring things out. She is helping out in the meantime." I had closed a $500,000 deal that very morning. It never mattered what I achieved. They refused to see it. When I bought my Lexus 2 years ago, my mother sniffed and told her friends it must be leased. When I moved into this apartment with its view of Central Park, Sophie said loudly at dinner that a boyfriend must be paying for it. I had no boyfriend. Every penny came from me, from the company I had built out of sheer grit. The most painful part was that they never even asked. Not once in 10 years had anyone in my family sat me down and said, "Claire, what exactly are you working on?" They filled in the blanks with their own version of me, the girl who was always available to cook, to fetch, to clean. My phone buzzed again. A text from Maria, just confirming the menu for New Year's Eve, boss. Excited for Miami. I smiled at the word boss. To my employees, I was not invisible. I was respected. They threw me a surprise party last year when we landed the Rosewood account. They cheered when Forbes included me in their list of rising entrepreneurs. They toasted to me when we opened our Chicago branch. My own family had never once said congratulations. Scrolling through my photos, I paused at one that had been taken at a charity gala last spring. I was shaking hands with the mayor, my team standing proudly behind me. My company's name glowed on the banner in the background. None of my relatives had ever seen that picture. To them, my victories were inconvenient truths, best left unmentioned. Another ping, this time an email. The subject line read, "Forbes cover story draft." My PR manager had attached a proof of the article scheduled to run on January 1st. The headline read, "From Invisible to Invaluable. How Claire Monroe Built a Catering Empire Without a Dollar of Family Money." I clicked through the draft, scanning the paragraphs that described my early years, the long nights, the sacrifices, the relentless drive. Then came the line that struck me hardest. Her family assumed she was unemployed. It was easier to build in silence than to fight their assumptions. They had no idea that in 2 days their invisible daughter would be on the cover of every Forbes magazine across the country. As I closed the file, my phone lit up again with another text from Sophie. "Do not embarrass us tomorrow. 30 guests are counting on you. Victoria Liang will be there." I set the phone down on the counter and stared at it until the screen went dark. They still believed they could command me like a servant. They did not know that while they scrambled to impress Victoria with borrowed glamour, I would be meeting her as an equal partner. I reached for my suitcase and slid the folder with the contracts inside. The zipper closed smoothly, the sound crisp and final. I could feel the weight of the decision settling over me, heavy but right. Tomorrow I would board a plane to Miami. Tomorrow my mother would discover that the daughter she dismissed as help had been the boss all along. The next morning, I woke to a gray December sky and the hum of traffic below my window. I made coffee and tried to steady myself, but I knew the storm was coming. By mid-morning, the first call came. My mother's voice was sharp, clipped, the kind of tone that expected obedience. Finally, she said, "I was starting to worry you weren't taking this seriously." "Mom, I can't do it." "What do you mean you can't?" she snapped. "You are needed here. I'm flying to Miami tonight." The silence that followed was so loud I could hear her breath catch. Then came her laugh, the cruel one that always managed to cut me in half. "A business trip, Claire. You have no business. Stop this nonsense and get home." I gripped the phone tighter, my voice steady. "I'm not coming. Family comes first." Sophie needs this. Family comes first when you want me to roast turkeys and clean dishes. When has family ever come first for me? How dare you talk to me this way? We raised you, we gave you everything. You gave me chores, I answered quietly. That's all. Her voice broke into a shout. If you walk away now, don't bother coming back. I closed my eyes, pressing back the old instinct to apologize. Then I guess this is goodbye. You can't be serious. I am. I'm done being the servant. Ungrateful girl, she hissed. The line went dead. My hands shook not from fear but from the rush of freedom. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the phone as it buzzed again. Sophie's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. What is wrong with you? She screamed. Mom's in tears, Dad's furious. You're ruining everything. I have a meeting, Sophie. Stop lying. This is about last month when Mom gave me your room. My room became your closet years ago. This is about my actual career. Career. You cook sometimes. That's not a career. I almost laughed at the irony. I own a company. Sure you do, she said, with that mocking edge that had followed me since childhood. Fine. I'll pay you to cook. $200. More than fair. My laugh came out cold. My day rate is $6,000. Keep your money. You are unbelievable. Mom will disown you. That's her choice. Do you realize what you're doing? 30 guests. Executives. Victoria Liang will be there. She could change my life. Hire a caterer. It's December 30th. No one is available. I thought of the slip of paper on my counter, with 3 emergency catering hotlines numbers I had written down in case they came begging. They would never think to ask. I kept it to myself. I'm not coming, I said again. Her voice rose to a shriek. If you do this, you are dead to us. I whispered back into the quiet room. I already am. I hung up and turned the phone face down. The silence afterward felt heavier than any argument. I walked into the kitchen, poured another cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter. For once I had chosen myself, but the storm did not pass. Within the hour, my phone exploded with texts. Mom, you are selfish. Sophie, everyone will know you ruined Christmas. Dad, who almost never texted, wrote only one line. Your mother is upset. Fix this. I placed the phone in a drawer and shut it. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound. I thought about all the years I had caved, all the nights I had driven home from Westport, exhausted, smelling of onions and grease, while Sophie collected praise. Not this time. Late in the afternoon, the phone rang again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sophie's voice was tight with panic. Do you realize what's happening? Mom's calling every restaurant within 50 miles. Nothing. She's losing her mind. I pictured my mother pacing the marble kitchen, pulling open empty cabinets, her face red with frustration. For a moment, I almost felt sorry. Then I remembered the way she had laughed when I once mentioned running my own business. What business, Claire? Your little cooking hobby. I won't be there, I said firmly. Then you're finished with us. Maybe I was finished a long time ago. I ended the call and slipped my ticket into my handbag. The Uber confirmation popped up on my screen. Pickup in 2 hours. I exhaled slowly, the knot in my stomach loosening. The sky outside had deepened to winter dusk by the time I wheeled my suitcase to the door. In the hallway, I paused, listening to the echo of my footsteps. For years, I had left this apartment carrying casseroles and trays, headed to serve a family who never saw me. Tonight, I left with contracts and a future of my own. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely free. The Uber driver greeted me with a quiet nod as he loaded my suitcase into the trunk. The city was already glowing with holiday light store windows, dressed in gold and silver couples huddled together against the cold. I sat in the back seat watching Manhattan blur past the rhythm of traffic matching the beat of my heart. I was leaving behind years of servitude, but I also knew chaos was about to erupt in Westport. By the time we reached JFK, my phone was buzzing nonstop. I had tucked it away, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled it out to find 20 new messages from Sophie and 5 from my mother. I scrolled through quickly. Mom, where are you? Sophie, this is life or death for me. Mom, answer me. Sophie, everyone will be here at 7. You better show. I powered the phone off before their panic could settle into me. Walking through the terminal with my boarding pass in hand, I felt lighter, as if each step pulled me further from their control. The line at security was long, families wrangling children, travelers balancing bags of last-minute gifts. I kept my head down, focused on the gate ahead. Hours later, while I sat waiting to board, I imagined the scene unfolding back home. Guests arriving in expensive coats, champagne flutes, set out my mother sweeping through the foyer with her practiced smile. They would expect the scent of garlic and herbs drifting from the kitchen, the clatter of dishes being plated, the efficiency that only I ever delivered. Instead, they would find silence. I pictured my mother opening the refrigerator to see nothing but milk and condiments. I could almost hear her sharp intake of breath, the rising pitch of her voice as she demanded answers. I imagined Sophie frantically calling local restaurants, realizing one by one that no one could prepare 30 dinners on December 30th at 6 o'clock in the evening. The thought made me smile, though there was sadness threaded through it. I had never wanted to humiliate them. I had wanted them to see me, to respect me. But humiliation was the only language they seemed to understand. The announcement for boarding jolted me back. I rose, handed my ticket to the agent, and walked onto the plane. Settling into my seat, I exhaled. At 8 o'clock, the plane lifted into the dark sky, leaving Connecticut far below. The next morning in Miami, the air was warm and humid, palm trees swaying against a pale sunrise. I checked into the Summit Hotel, my suite overlooking the water. A chilled bottle of champagne waited on the table with a handwritten note. Welcome, Miss Monroe. Looking forward to our partnership. Victoria Liang. I set the note down carefully, feeling a swell of anticipation. Tonight, I would meet her face to face, no longer as the invisible daughter, but as the CEO of Monroe Luxe Events. Curiosity tugged at me, though, and I powered on my phone. The flood of notifications nearly froze the screen. I opened Sophie's texts first. Claire, where are you? Mom is losing her mind. Mom called every restaurant in Fairfield County. Nothing. Guests are arriving. The next came faster, timed minutes apart. Do you understand what you've done? Victoria is here. She looks disgusted. People are whispering. We had to order pizza. Pizza Claire. On the Waterford Crystal. I sat down on the edge of the bed, laughing quietly, not because it was funny, but because the image was so sharp I could see it as if I were standing there. 30 elegantly dressed guests picking at delivery pizza, while my mother tried to hide her fury. Sophie handing out paper plates because no one had thought to warm the china. More texts arrived. This is your fault. Everyone thinks we are ridiculous. Victoria left early. Mom is telling people you're unstable. I closed the phone and set it aside, letting the words settle. It was happening exactly as I had imagined. The difference was that this time I was not there to clean up the mess. For the first time in my life, my absence was louder than my presence. I walked to the window and looked out over the glittering water. Tonight, I would shake Victoria Liang's hand, and tomorrow I would present my company to her board. The timing could not have been more perfect. While my family scrambled to explain themselves, I was preparing to secure the contract that would carry us into the next decade. The irony was not lost on me. My mother had bragged for weeks that her eldest daughter would be cooking, that the Monroes knew how to entertain with style. She wanted so badly to impress Victoria. She never realized Victoria already knew me, already respected my work, already wanted to build a future with me. I poured a glass of the champagne Victoria had sent and took a slow sip. The bubbles fizzed on my tongue, a quiet celebration. Somewhere in Westport, my mother's face was pale with humiliation. Somewhere in that grand house, Sophie's voice was shrill with excuses. And here in Miami, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The lobby of the Summit Hotel was buzzing with New Year's travelers when I stepped out of the elevator that evening. My heart thudded as I smoothed the front of my navy blazer, the one I had worn for every big meeting since the early days of my company. The restaurant was tucked behind tall glass doors, its glow spilling into the hallway. I paused, breathed in deeply, and walked inside. Victoria Liang was already seated at a corner table, a glass of sparkling water in front of her, her phone face down. She looked up when she saw me, and her expression softened into a smile that carried both curiosity and respect. "Claire Monroe," she said as I reached her table. "Finally we meet in person." I extended my hand. "Miss Liang, it's an honor. Please call me Victoria." She shook my hand firmly, her eyes sharp but kind. "Sit down. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time." I slid into the seat across from her, setting my folder beside me. The waiter appeared, menus in hand, but Victoria waved him off. "Let's not worry about food just yet. I want to talk." I nodded, steadying my breath. She leaned back, slightly studying me. "You know, I just came from one of the strangest dinner parties I've ever attended." My chest tightened. I sipped my water to hide it. "It was in Connecticut," she continued, "hosted by a woman named Elaine Monroe. She promised an extravagant year-end dinner. 30 guests, silver, crystal, the works." My fingers dug into the stem of my glass, but I kept my face neutral. "When we arrived, there was nothing prepared," Victoria said, shaking her head. Guests stood around awkwardly while the hostess scrambled. Eventually, pizza boxes arrived. Pizza Claire, on Waterford Crystal. I almost felt sorry for her. I let out a small sound that could pass for sympathy. Victoria leaned forward now, her gaze locking onto mine. What struck me most was not the food or the lack of it. It was the way she spent the entire evening blaming her eldest daughter. She told everyone this daughter was unreliable, unstable, incapable of holding a job. She practically announced it from the rooftops. Heat rose in my chest. I excused myself politely after 20 minutes, Victoria said. "I don't tolerate unprofessionalism." But here's the irony. For the past 2 years, my board has been recommending I meet a rising catering executive out of New York. They've been raving about Monroe Luxe events. Imagine my surprise when I walked into this dinner and realized the last names matched. I steadied my hands on my lap. Victoria tilted her head, studying me with sharp curiosity. "I have to ask Claire, that daughter she was talking about, was she talking about you?" The moment stretched long. I considered deflecting, considered denying, but something in Victoria's tone told me she already knew the truth. "Yes," I said quietly. Her eyebrows lifted, but she did not look shocked. Instead, she laughed softly, almost in disbelief. "Well, that explains everything. The daughter she dismissed as help is the very CEO I've been trying to meet." I felt a rush of emotions I could not name. Embarrassment, relief, April. Victoria reached for her glass. "Claire, I don't care about family politics. What I care about is results, and your company has impressed everyone we've spoken to. That's why we're here." "Thank you," I said, my voice steadier now. She smiled. "Though I have to admit it is a story I won't forget." The waiter returned then, and we ordered dinner, though I hardly tasted the food. Conversation flowed easily, shifting from logistics to vision, from staffing to design. The more we spoke, the more I felt grounded. She wasn't here to test me. She was here to partner with me. At one point, Victoria set her fork down and looked at me with something close to admiration. "Do you know what I like most about your story? You built this without family money. Without connections. It's rare in this industry. People underestimate you, but you deliver." Her words warmed me in a way I hadn't expected. By the time dessert was cleared, I felt lighter. The deal was not signed yet, but I could feel it leaning my way. As we stood to leave, Victoria shook my hand again. Tomorrow's presentation will just be a formality. I have no doubt you're the right partner for us. Walking back through the lobby, my phone buzzed with messages, but I didn't look. For tonight, the noise from Westport could wait. I stepped into the elevator, the city lights of Miami glittering outside the glass walls, and allowed myself one long breath of relief. The morning sun poured through the sheer curtains, warming the edge of the bed where I sat with a cup of coffee. My nerves were buzzing not from caffeine but from the weight of what was ahead. In just a few hours, I would be standing in front of Summit Hospitality's board, presenting the company I had built from nothing. I took a deep breath and reminded myself I belonged here. My phone lit up with a flood of notifications. Against my better judgment, I opened them. The first was from Sophie. "How could you do this?" Victoria left our party early. Everyone was embarrassed. "Mom is furious." Then another. "You humiliated us. Do you know people are talking about pizza on Crystal?" I scrolled further. Mom had sent half a dozen messages, each more frantic than the last. "You ruined everything. How could you walk away from your family? People are saying you abandoned us. Elaine Monroe does not get abandoned." My father's message came last. It was short. "Please call your mother. She is not well." I set the phone down. My hands trembled, but not from guilt. For once the shame wasn't mine to carry. Later that morning, I walked into the conference room where the summit board had gathered. The space was sleek and modern with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. Victoria greeted me warmly, her presence grounding me. She introduced me to her team, then took her seat at the head of the table. As I began my presentation, I could feel eyes studying me. I spoke about growth, about the 4 locations we had opened, about the waiting list of clients who trusted our services. I showed images of events we had managed, from intimate weddings to grand galas. The numbers were strong, the projections even stronger. For a moment, everything was steady. Then, Victoria's assistant entered quietly and handed her an iPad. She glanced at it, her brow furrowing, then passed it across the table. A murmur spread among the board members. Victoria turned to me, her eyes sharp but curious. "Claire, is this you?" On the screen was a photo taken from inside my parents' home, posted on LinkedIn by one of the guests. Pizza boxes sprawled across the mahogany dining table, crystal goblets half full of soda, my mother, standing red-faced in the background. And there in the corner of the frame, a family portrait from last Thanksgiving. I was barely visible in it, half hidden behind Sophie. The caption read, "A dinner to remember at the Monroe residence." I steadied myself. Yes, that's my family. The room went silent. Victoria folded her hands, studying me. "Your mother spoke a great deal about her eldest daughter last night. She said you were unreliable, that you could not hold a job. She told her guests you usually just cook for them." I felt the sting of those words, but kept my shoulders squared. "She has never asked what I do." "So she does not know," Victoria said slowly, "that you are the CEO of Monroe Luxe Events." "Number she does not." The board members exchanged looks, some surprised, others amused. James, the head of operations, leaned forward. "Let me get this straight. The woman who ordered pizza for 30 executives last night does not realize her daughter runs one of the fastest-growing event companies on the East Coast. That is correct." Victoria leaned back, laughter spilling out genuine and unrestrained. "This is extraordinary." She shook her head. "The very person she dismissed is the one we want to entrust with our brand." Her laughter broke the tension, and even a few board members smiled. For the first time, I felt the weight of years of invisibility lift slightly. Before the meeting could resume, Victoria's assistant returned with another update. "Forbes just released their list early," she announced, projecting the screen onto the wall. My face filled the screen, the cover image unmistakable. From invisible to invaluable. How Claire Monroe built a catering empire without $1 of family money. The boardroom buzzed. Victoria turned back to me with a knowing look. "Well, Claire, It seems your family is about to discover the truth. I met her gaze calm and certain. Yes, they are. The room erupted in applause as Victoria extended her hand across the table. Gentlemen, I think we've found our partner. I reached out, my palm steady, the moment crystallizing into something I had dreamed of for years. My family's words no longer defined me. My work did. As the board clapped, my phone lit up again on the table, buzzing with my mother's name. I let it ring. Victoria's hand was still warm in mine when she excused herself to make a quick call. I watched her step out of the glass doors. Phone pressed to her ear, her expression animated. I turned my own screen over, silencing the persistent buzzing that hadn't stopped since dawn. I knew it was my mother. I also knew I wasn't ready to hear her voice. When Victoria returned, she had a glimmer in her eyes. I just spoke to your mother, she said calmly as she sat back down. Her voice was shaking. Claire. She begged me not to cut ties with their family after last night. I told her the truth. I told her we had just signed a contract with the most talented entrepreneur I know. Her face when I said your name, well, you can probably imagine. The board chuckled quietly, but I felt something shift deep inside me. The years of invisibility, the mockery, the dismissals, all of it had been exposed in one phone call. My phone vibrated again. Messages piled in rapid fire. From my mother, how dare you humiliate us like this? From Sophie, is this some twisted joke? From my father, call home now. I slipped the phone into my bag. They could wait. That evening, after the documents were finalized and the champagne poured, I finally allowed myself to exhale. Marcus called from New York, his voice brimming with relief. Claire, you did it. This contract changes everything. Maria shouted congratulations in the background, the sound of clinking glasses carrying through the line. For once the celebration was mine. But even in the glow of victory, a pang of unease gnawed at me. My family wasn't just embarrassed. They were unraveling. By midnight, Sophie's messages turned frantic. Victoria canceled our PR contract. Do you understand what you've done? $500,000 gone. Mom is being pushed out of the charity board. Everyone is whispering. I stared at the words, feeling no triumph, only inevitability. Actions had consequences, and for once those consequences weren't mine to shoulder. The next morning I took a walk along the beach outside the hotel. The tide rolled in steady, unbothered by human drama. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. Against my better judgment, I answered. Claire, his voice was low, almost tired. Your mother is beside herself. She fainted last night when Victoria told her about you. I stopped walking, staring at the endless horizon. Why are you surprised, Dad? Because she truly didn't know, he said quietly. I suspected years ago when mail came to the house with your company's name, but I let her version of you stand. That was easier. His honesty cut deeper than my mother's cruelty. Easier for you, maybe. Not for me. He sighed heavily. I know, and I'm ashamed. We stood in silence, the waves filling the gaps. Then he said what I had waited decades to hear. I'm proud of you, Claire. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. It was too little, too late, but it was something. When I hung up, I found another message waiting. This one from a former client of Sophie's PR firm. We've decided to pull our account. Word gets around fast. By afternoon, Sophie called, her voice cracking with desperation. Claire, you have to fix this. Talk to Victoria, tell her to give us another chance. I sat on the hotel balcony watching seagulls wheel overhead. No, Sophie, this isn't mine to fix. She broke into sobs. You don't understand. Without that contract, we're finished. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of her unravel wash over me. For years, I had been their safety net, the one who caught every fall. Not this time. The news spread quickly. By evening, messages poured in from Westport acquaintances, some congratulatory, others thinly veiled with curiosity. The Monroe family had become the latest country club scandal. The elegant hostess forced to serve Papa John's the golden daughter, losing clients, while the invisible ones signed million-dollar deals. That night, I sat in the quiet of my suite staring at the city lights. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by what my family thought of me. Their opinions had lost their weight. The truth had finally spoken for itself. The morning after the signing, I woke up in my hotel room to the sound of the ocean rolling against the Miami shoreline. Sunlight poured through the curtains, bright and relentless, as if to remind me the world outside had changed overnight. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, realizing how different my life felt compared to just a week ago. The weight that had once pressed on my chest was gone, replaced by something steadier, stronger. By the time I dressed and went downstairs, my phone was already buzzing nonstop. Voicemails, texts, emails, some congratulatory, others dripping with panic. Headlines of the Forbes cover were everywhere, circulating on social media. The words "built without $1 of family money" kept getting repeated. My family's silence was deafening, except for the few angry, desperate messages that slipped through. When I finally answered a call, it wasn't from my mother or my sister, but from my father. His voice sounded strained, almost weary. "Claire, your mother. She fainted again last night." He paused, his breath catching. "She's been calling everyone at the club, trying to explain away what happened. They're not buying it." I leaned against a marble pillar in the hotel lobby, clutching the phone tighter. "Dad, what exactly is she telling them?" He sighed heavily. "That you blindsided us. That you deliberately kept your success secret to humiliate the family." I let out a bitter laugh. I kept it secret because no one cared enough to ask. There was silence on his end, followed by something I never expected to hear. "I think you're right." Those words, simple as they were, cut straight through me. After years of silence, he was finally admitting what I'd known all along. Before I could respond, another call buzzed in. This time it was Sophie. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Her voice was ragged, hoarse with stress. "Claire, do you have any idea what you've done? Half our clients have pulled out. Victoria canceled our biggest contract. The firm is collapsing." I closed my eyes, listening to her unravel. "Sophie, this isn't my doing. These are the consequences of your own choices." She let out a sharp laugh that cracked like glass. "No, this is about you refusing to help. You could fix this with one phone call." I shook my head, pacing across the polished lobby floor. "I've been fixing things for 15 years, cooking, covering, cleaning up every mess this family dumped on me. Not anymore." Her voice rose desperate now. "If the firm goes under, it destroys everything I've built. Maybe it's time you understand what it feels like to build something from the ground up," I said quietly. "Without someone holding the ladder for you." She cursed under her breath, then hung up. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. Around me, guests came and went, laughing, checking and sipping coffee. Their lives moved forward while mine felt like it was standing at the edge of something vast and irreversible. Later that day, I called Aunt Joanne. She had left me a message that sounded urgent, her calm voice almost trembling. When she answered, her words poured out carefully. "Claire, I think you need to hear the truth." I sank into a chair by the window, staring at the waves. "Go on. Your mother has always been threatened by you. Even as a child, you were strong-willed, clever. You saw through her games. She decided early on that Sophie would be the golden child and you were the scapegoat. That way Sophie could shine without competition." Her words landed like stones dropping into deep water. I rubbed my forehead, trying to piece it together. "So all those years, it wasn't because I wasn't enough. It was because you were too much," Joanne said softly. "Too capable, too independent. She couldn't stand being overshadowed." I thought of the endless holidays spent in the kitchen, the years of hearing I was between jobs, the way they introduced me as nothing more than extra hands. It all made sense in a way that was painful and liberating at once. "Thank you," I whispered, "for telling me what no one else would." That evening, back in my apartment in Manhattan, I opened my laptop to catch up on work. But instead of focusing on numbers and schedules, I found myself staring at photos. My team gathered around the new Chicago office, smiling proudly. Maria holding the keys to her first home. Marcus at his daughter's school recital. Real lives, real milestones made possible by the company I had built. And not one of those faces doubted my worth. Not one of them had ever dismissed me as invisible. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from a Westport news outlet. The headline read, "Charity Board Removes Elaine Monroe Amid Scandal." Below it, another article surfaced, "Sophie Monroe's PR firm faces collapse after loss of major clients." The unraveling was happening in real time, and I was watching it from a distance untouched. The next morning I met Marcus and Maria in the office to discuss expansion. Their excitement was contagious, their belief in me unshakable. As Maria outlined her ideas for new culinary projects, I felt a swell of gratitude. This was my family now. People who respected me, who didn't need me to prove my worth by serving them. That night I walked through Central Park alone, the air cold and sharp against my cheeks. Families strolled by, children laughing, couples holding hands. I thought of my own family scattered in shame and anger, still trying to control a narrative that had slipped away. For years I had begged for their approval, convinced that if I worked harder, cooked better, stayed quiet longer, they would finally see me. Now I knew better. Some people choose blindness because it keeps their world intact. And when the truth finally breaks through, it shatters everything they built on lies. Back at home, I stood by the window overlooking the city lights. My phone was silent for the first time in days, and the quiet felt like freedom. I thought about what Aunt Joanne had said about my mother's jealousy, about the scapegoat role I had been forced to play. I was done playing it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their burdens, their expectations, or their shame. I was carrying only myself, and it was more than enough. And in that stillness, I realized something. The revenge hadn't been deliberate. It had been a byproduct of living authentically, of refusing to shrink any longer. Their world had crumbled, but mine was just beginning to grow roots deeper than ever before. I closed my laptop that night with a sense of finality. Tomorrow I would meet with a new partner, someone who saw my company as a national player. The future was wide open, and for once I was stepping into it without fear, without apology. The girl who once cooked in silence for a family that never saw her was gone. The woman who built an empire from nothing had taken her place, and she wasn't going anywhere. January first dawned cold and bright, the kind of morning that made the city glitter as if dusted with diamonds. I was sipping coffee in my apartment, the view of Central Park frosted in white below me, when my phone lit up with dozens of notifications. Forbes had just released their New Year's issue. There it was, staring back at me from every screen. The cover. My face centered between two other entrepreneurs, the headline bold and impossible to ignore. Top Entrepreneurs of the Year. And beneath my name, Claire Monroe, built from scratch. For a moment I just sat there, the cup warm in my hands, letting the image sink in. I remembered all those years when my mother laughed at me, saying I was between jobs, when my sister introduced me as if I were invisible. Now my face was on newsstands across the country. The calls started within minutes. Journalists, colleagues, even former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. But what struck me most were the contracts. By the end of the day, my inbox overflowed with inquiries from luxury hotels, international resorts, and corporations that had once kept me waiting in lobbies. Now they wanted me. Now they wanted Stellar. At the office, the energy was electric. Our holiday decorations still twinkled as if celebrating with us. Maria hugged me so tightly I thought I might lose my breath. "Claire, this is everything. You did it." Marcus lifted a glass of sparkling cider and laughed. "Correction, we did it. 100 employees and counting, and this is only the beginning." I watched my team, cheering, their faces shining with pride, and I felt something deeper than success. This wasn't just about proving my family wrong. This was about building something real, something lasting, something that gave people dignity and purpose. Later that week, an email arrived with Columbia University's seal. They were inviting me to give a keynote lecture, "Success Without Permission." The very words I had lived by now, a topic students would gather to hear. I stared at the invitation for a long time, tears stinging my eyes. I had once been told my ambitions for Ivy League schools were too high, too unrealistic. Now they wanted me to stand on their stage. I walked through the office halls after the news, watching Maria outlining expansion plans on a whiteboard, Marcus guiding the finance team through new projections. These weren't just employees anymore. They were leaders in their own right. I pulled Marcus aside. "You've carried this company with me since day one. It's time you had the title to prove it." His eyes widened as I announced him as Chief Operating Officer. Maria, beaming, was promoted to executive chef with full creative control. The room erupted in applause. Balloons appeared from nowhere, someone popped a bottle, and for once I allowed myself to bask in the joy without holding back. That night, as I sat by the window in my apartment, the city glowing with New Year's fireworks, my phone buzzed. The message was simple, but it pierced me straight through. "From my father, I'm proud of you, Claire." I should have said this 10 years ago. I pressed the phone against my chest, closing my eyes. The words were late, far too late, but they mattered all the same. For once, I let myself believe them. The Manhattan skyline glittered like 1,000 tiny diamonds against the velvet of the night. The streets below buzzed with yellow cabs honking and people hurrying to late dinners. I had chosen this restaurant very carefully, not just for its reputation, but for its symbolism. High ceilings, chandeliers dripping with crystals, and waiters gliding across the floor with silver trays. It was the kind of place my parents had always deemed too sophisticated for someone like me. Tonight it was exactly where I wanted to face them. When I arrived, the hostess led me to the private dining room. My heels clicked on the polished marble, each step steady, deliberate. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind for years, but reality carried a different weight. Behind the closed doors, my family waited. Richard, my father, stiff-backed and proud. Elaine, my mother, fragile elegance with judgment etched in her eyes. And Sophie, my younger sister, flawless, as always the one who had worn their approval like a crown since childhood. As the door opened, they turned toward me. For a brief second, silence wrapped around us, heavy with years of distant disappointment and unsaid words. Then my father cleared his throat. "Claire," he said, his voice clipped as if even my name were an effort. "Thank you for coming." I slid into my seat without rushing, laying my clutch on the table. "Of course," I said evenly. "But let's be clear. This isn't a family reunion. It's a negotiation." My mother's hand fluttered nervously to her pearls. "Negotiation, Claire, this is dinner. We just wanted no mom," I cut in gently but firmly. "You wanted to pretend everything could be swept under the rug. That we could smile over appetizers and act like you didn't dismiss me as if I were free labor in your empire. If we're going to talk, we're going to talk honestly." The waiter appeared with menus, and the air thickened with discomfort. My father ordered a bourbon neat. Sophie asked for sparkling water, and I chose a glass of champagne. It wasn't about the drink. It was about reminding myself that I deserved to celebrate, even if they couldn't see it. When the waiter left, I leaned forward. "I'll make this simple. If you want any place in my life moving forward, there are conditions. 1, you respect me. 2, you stop treating me like the daughter who failed because I chose my own path. And 3, you acknowledge my success openly, not just in whispers when no one else can hear." Sophie scoffed softly. "Success, Claire, come on. You organize events." That's hardly her words cut off when I locked eyes with her. "Hardly what, Sophie?" "Hardly running a multi-million-dollar company that caters to the most elite clients in New York. Hardly managing a staff of 30 people and orchestrating galas that raise millions for charity. You call that hardly? Funny because I call it everything you once said I'd never be." Color rose in her cheeks. She glanced down at her napkin, twisting it between her manicured fingers. For once she didn't have a comeback. Elena's voice trembled. "Claire, we didn't realize how much we hurt you." Her eyes glistened with tears, the kind I had waited a lifetime to see. "I thought I was protecting you, guiding you, but maybe I was jealous too. You had this fire in you, this independence I never dared to claim for myself." I swallowed hard emotions tugging at the edges of my resolve. But I stayed steady. "It wasn't just jealousy, Mom. It was dismissal. Every holiday, every family meeting, I was treated like the help. I cooked, I cleaned, I served, and you let me without once asking what I dreamed of. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. Then, with a deep breath, he did something I had never seen before. He lowered his gaze. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice rough. "I was wrong. I measured you by my standards, not yours. I thought you were wasting your time. But clearly you've built something I don't even understand." The admission hung in the air, almost surreal. My father, the man who had always stood above us all, was bowing his head to me. I let the silence stretch, savoring the shift in power. Then I spoke, calm but unyielding. "I'll give you a chance. But make no mistake, I am the boss now. I am not your free help, not your afterthought, not the daughter who didn't measure up. If you want me in your lives, you meet me where I stand. And where I stand is on my own, 2 feet stronger than ever." For the first time, Sophie's mask cracked. Her voice was small, almost childlike. "I've envied you, Claire. I had their approval, but it was conditional. You carved your own way, and I never had the courage." I blinked, taken aback. Of all the things I expected tonight, Sophie's confession wasn't one of them. The waiter returned with our entrees, breaking the intensity for a moment. None of us touched the food right away. The real nourishment was in the words we had finally dared to speak. By the end of the night, I agreed to open the door a crack, not wide, but enough for possibility. "I'll give us another chance," I said, standing. "But only if you accept me as I am. The days of me standing in the kitchen with a frying pan while you dismiss me are over." Elaine dabbed at her eyes, Richard nodded stiffly, and Sophie managed a weak smile. The following weekend, I invited them to my apartment overlooking Central Park. It wasn't just an apartment, it was a statement, a space that screamed independence and success. The dining table was set not by my hands, but by the polished crew of Monroe Lux Events, my own company. Waiters in crisp uniforms served cocktails and plated hors d'oeuvre, while a private chef prepared dinner in the gleaming kitchen. Elaine looked around, astonished. "You live here," she whispered, as if the walls themselves demanded reverence. "Yes," I said with quiet pride. "And tonight, I won't be in the kitchen. Tonight, I am the guest of honor in my own home." As laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, I felt something I hadn't in years, a sense of peace. Not because they had finally validated me, but because I no longer needed their validation to stand tall. And as I raised my glass, I shared the lesson that had carried me through. If you're listening tonight, remember, this: don't ever let anyone make you feel small. Don't settle for being treated like free help when you're capable of running the whole show. Know your worth, claim your place, and never apologize for the empire you've built. The glasses chimed in unison, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my past lift, replaced by the undeniable truth I was never the free help. I was the boss all along.